For decades, rockets had one ridiculous business model: use them once, then throw them away. Imagine buying a Boeing 747, flying from New York to London, and destroying the aircraft after landing. That's basically how much of the rocket industry worked. Then SpaceX changed the equation. Instead of throwing away one of the most expensive parts of the rocket, they started landing it and flying it again. That single idea helped change the economics of reaching space, but reusable rockets were only the beginning. Because today, SpaceX isn't just building rockets. It's building satellites, a global internet network, and perhaps one day, an entirely new economy in space. So how did SpaceX turn one of the world's most expensive industries into a business? Chapter 1: The $60 million problem. For most of the space age, launching something into orbit was extraordinarily expensive. And there's a simple reason why. Rockets are incredibly complex machines. They require powerful engines, advanced materials, massive amounts of fuel, and thousands of components working perfectly together. But after all that engineering, much of the rocket was historically used only once. SpaceX attacked this problem from a different direction. What if the most expensive parts could come back? Falcon 9 was designed with a first stage capable of returning to Earth, landing vertically, and eventually flying again. Suddenly, a rocket wasn't necessarily a disposable product. It could start behaving more like transportation infrastructure. And the more often you can reuse expensive hardware, the more opportunities you have to spread its manufacturing cost across multiple missions. But there's an important detail. Reusability doesn't automatically make launches cheap. The rocket still needs inspection, maintenance, fuel, ground crews, and refurbishment. The real advantage comes when you can reuse hardware, frequently and reliably. And that's where SpaceX began building something competitors found extremely difficult to match: scale. Chapter 2: The flywheel. And then SpaceX discovered something even more powerful. The more rockets it launched, the better it could become at launching rockets. More missions create more operational experience. More experience can improve reliability. Higher launch frequency can spread infrastructure costs across more flights, and more reusable boosters can reduce the need to manufacture a completely new first stage for every mission. But SpaceX still needed customers, governments, satellite companies, commercial missions, and then SpaceX created its own enormous customer, Starlink. Instead of waiting for other companies to provide enough satellites to launch, SpaceX began launching thousands of its own. That created a remarkable business loop. SpaceX builds rockets. Those rockets launch Starlink satellites. Starlink creates demand for more launches. More launches give SpaceX more experience, and Starlink can generate recurring subscription revenue from customers on Earth. SpaceX was no longer simply selling rocket launches. It was using its rockets to build another business on top of them. Chapter 3: Starlink, the business above Earth. Starlink changes the SpaceX story completely, because launching rockets creates revenue, but internet subscriptions can create something even more valuable: recurring revenue. A rocket launch happens once, but a Starlink customer can pay month after month. SpaceX launches satellites into low Earth orbit. Those satellites connect customers to the internet, and the network can reach places where traditional infrastructure is difficult or expensive to build: remote homes, ships, aircraft, businesses, and regions with limited broadband infrastructure. But here's where the strategy gets interesting. SpaceX controls both sides of the equation. It builds the satellites, and it owns the rockets that launch them. A competitor building a satellite network may need to pay another company to reach orbit. SpaceX can essentially launch its own infrastructure using its own transportation system. Rockets build Starlink. Starlink generates demand for rockets. And both businesses strengthen each other. That's a powerful advantage. But Elon Musk's biggest bet isn't Falcon 9 or even Starlink. It's something much larger: Starship. Chapter 4: The Starship Bet. Falcon 9 changed the economics of rockets by recovering its first stage. Starship is attempting something far more ambitious: full reusability. The goal isn't simply to recover part of the rocket, it's to rapidly reuse both major stages of the system. If SpaceX can make that work reliably, the implications could be enormous. larger payloads, more Starlink satellites per mission, more frequent launches, and potentially a dramatically different cost structure for putting mass into orbit. Think about what happened to computing. Computers became cheaper, and suddenly entirely new industries became possible. The same happened with the internet. When access became cheaper and faster, businesses appeared that couldn't have existed before. SpaceX is making a similar bet on space. If getting to orbit becomes dramatically cheaper, the biggest opportunity may not be the businesses we already know about. It could be businesses that don't make economic sense yet. Manufacturing in space, larger satellite networks, commercial space stations, lunar infrastructure, and eventually Mars. But that's also where the risk becomes enormous, because Starship isn't just another product. It's an extraordinarily complex engineering program, and SpaceX has to prove that ambitious technology can become reliable infrastructure. Chapter 5. Why SpaceX is so valuable. And now we can understand why investors view SpaceX differently from a traditional aerospace company. SpaceX isn't really one business. It's an ecosystem. Falcon provides launch infrastructure. Starlink provides recurring connectivity revenue. Starship could potentially increase the amount of cargo SpaceX can move into orbit, and every part can strengthen the others. That's the bull case. But there are serious risks. Space is unforgiving. Rockets fail. Satellites are expensive. Starlink requires enormous infrastructure. Starship still has major technical milestones ahead. SpaceX also operates in an industry heavily influenced by governments, regulators, national security, and geopolitics. So the investment story depends on something very difficult. SpaceX must keep turning engineering breakthroughs into reliable businesses. Because technological leadership alone isn't enough. Eventually the economics have to work. Space is becoming a business. SpaceX didn't invent rockets, it didn't invent satellites, and it didn't invent satellite internet. What it changed was the economics connecting them. Reusable rockets made launch frequency increasingly important. Starlink gave SpaceX a massive reason to keep launching. And Starship is an attempt to push that model much further. That's why the most important SpaceX story may not be Mars, it may not even be rockets. It's the idea that access to space could become infrastructure. Because when transportation becomes cheaper, entire industries can appear behind it. Railroads changed continents, ships changed global trade, airplanes changed travel, and SpaceX is betting that reusable rockets could do something similar above Earth.